And along with the frameworks and all of their strong proponents, along came tribalism. And everyone here, I'm sure, is familiar with at least some of these tribes. And the Agile community continues to split up into more and more tribes and lines of thought and have really intense debates with each other about who's better and who's right. Tribes tend to promote their favorite framework over all the others. And, you know, as humans, it's very natural to feel really good when we find our tribe. Because in our tribe, we feel safe, we feel important, we feel like we belong, we feel like we're at home. But there's a dark side to all of these tribal ways of thinking because they can be arrogant and exclusive. The problem with tribalism is it frames those who disagree with our ideas and the core beliefs as the other, right? And tribe members begin to identify too strongly with their tribe and intentionally close themselves off from new ways of thinking. In other words, they get kind of stuck in a relatively rigid way of thinking. And if you're within the tribe, questioning the tribe can trigger defensiveness because people in the tribe feel personally attacked. And if you're outside of the tribe and you critique the tribe, well, forget it. You know, people will just discount what you say. And you may have experienced this yourself, you know, when you've asked a really hard question or you've tried a new approach or you've experimented with somebody and somebody said to you, well, that's not very agile. And that's kind of the opposite of the fundamental concept of agility, right? Is that we want to be open and we want to be flexible and experimental. And so these tribes can really get us into trouble. So it just divides us. And, you know, some of you may have heard my past talks on cognitive bias, one of my favorite topics. And with tribalism, I think what happens is we fall prey to the confirmation bias, which leads us to seek out evidence that supports our beliefs and to ignore evidence that doesn't fit in with our beliefs. And the biggest damage, I think, from tribalism in the context of Agile, as we're speaking about it here, is that it prevents us from truly communicating with each other and understanding one another. We can't really honestly retrospect on how Agile is working or not working or how it needs to be changed, if at all, when we cling to strong, unquestioned beliefs. Now, enough about all of that. What about things that the Agile Manifesto didn't mention? So these are all areas of knowledge and expertise that were well known even back in the 1990s. For example, business data. Data was really important back in 2001, and whole companies specialized in gathering and analyzing business data so that companies could use that, organizations could use it to make better decisions and get aligned on future plans and so forth. But the manifesto doesn't mention data. So there are some things, and there's others listed here that were not really included in the manifesto. But what we need to remember when we sit here and pile on critiques of the manifesto is that the manifesto never claimed to be the be-all or the end-all, right? It never said this is complete and this is all you need. It was a way, the challenge and the problem came up when people impose that way of thinking on the manifesto, that the manifesto is our bedrock and that's really all we need. And so the manifesto, I think over time, was interpreted, reinterpreted, misinterpreted, applied or misapplied. And that's where I think the Agile community got into some trouble. Now, I'd just like to say a quick word about data, because data is just so important today. And you could say, arguably, that data is almost more important than code. And methodologies that, you know, like Agile frameworks, they don't say a lot about data, with the exception of feature-driven development. And, you know, I will ask you, if you think about it, if you know, how many people have heard that your data teams push data to the data lake but it's not usable for machine learning. So it's because people aren't working with the teams to make sure they understand that when they use Scrum, they also need to figure out how to use other techniques across multiple teams, like domain-driven design, and that maintaining your enterprise data models is really essential if you want to leverage your data as an asset for business intelligence.